Indeed. Well, I want to bring in Oliver Wainwright, who's the Guardian newspaper's architecture and design critic. Oliver, you're relevant to this debate insofar as we're having it in the context of the building.
Yes.
And there seems to be an argument emerging that aesthetics trumped safety. Is that how it's been built?
I wouldn't say aesthetics. I think our obsession with sustainability trumped safety. And so what's happening with a lot of these post-war tower blocks is we're wrapping them in a new kind of very thick insulative skin. Effectively, that's the equivalent of wrapping them with firelighters and then putting a very thin coating of kitchen foil around the outside.
But just be clear, that's not just about prettifying, that's also about making them more energy efficient.
Exactly.
So there's an environmental dimension to it too.
So it's ironic. In the 1960s and 70s, when these buildings were built, we probably had the toughest fire safety standards we've ever had. If we had left these towers alone... Concrete, exactly. Concrete, brick, heavy masonry construction, a lot of asbestos, which obviously had its own downside, but it was actually very safe in terms of fire. If a fire broke out in one apartment, it was very unlikely to spread. What we've seen over the past few years, I mean, the Lacanal House fire in Camberwell in 2009 was a very similar situation to this, where it's actually the external cladding, which has been fitted much more recently, which has allowed the flames to spread. And so by trying to fix one problem of energy efficiency and increasing thermal performance of buildings, we've actually introduced a whole new set of problems, which is undermining the kind of safety that these buildings actually originally had.
Yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
Exactly. And there are actually very safe ways of retrofitting these buildings. Thermal performance doesn't also have to compromise fire safety. It's a question of choosing the right materials, of fixing them in the proper ways with fire breaks between floors. And people are starting to say, there are signs with this building that maybe the way it was actually retrofitted wasn't according to the architect's drawings, that corners might have possibly been cut on site, not the official fire breaks put in between apartments. So that will all hopefully come out in the inquiry.
Well, indeed it will, and we hope it will. I mean, for some people, this sort of relatively abstruse debate about architecture will feel too premature. There are bodies still waiting to be identified. There are still people who've got missing relatives. All the stuff we've been discussing. But it is worth making the point, isn't it, that the dozens of television cameras here, broadcasting around the world, the newspaper journalists, etc., will be feeding into a debate about how we house people with a growing population globally.
Yeah.
And, there is a fashion for, as urbanisation increases, for living in tall buildings. And this feeds into that, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, tall buildings aren't the danger, and I think it would be a real problem to kind of use the Grenfell Tower tragedy as an argument against living in tall buildings. It's an argument against deregulation. It's an argument against the government's kind of willful insistence on ignoring what experts have been telling them for the last few years, which is that we shouldn't be using these kinds of cladding systems. They've been proved to have gone wrong. So it's a real tragedy that it takes an event like this to actually force the government to wake up and to look at the regulations. Part B of building regs, which governs fire safety, hasn't had a comprehensive review since 2006. In 11 years, the way we build buildings has changed a lot. And most of those regulations are reviewed every 2 years, but they've just completely ignored fire safety, and now they're going to have to pay the price.
Well, Oliver, as you say, there is a public inquiry. It will grapple with some of those difficult questions. But for now, thanks very much indeed. Oliver Wainwright from The Guardian there, joining us as you look at live pictures in this